Well, welcome once again to the L&D Ninja Podcast. I am your host, Reggie Bedin, and I am coming to you from the beautiful city of Miami, which you see in the background. It's a beautiful day here. It's not too hot. It's not too humid. We're glad you're here. First of all, let me thank you for all your likes, all your sharing. You've made this podcast really stand out in the L&D space, and keep it going. If you find value in the content that we're bringing to you, please go ahead and share with other people in the space or people who may be thinking about joining the L&D space, because I think it's going to be very, very helpful to them. So once again, thank you. If you haven't done so, subscribe. You can go to any podcast platform and subscribe to the podcast. You can also subscribe in YouTube, and you will miss a beat there. Well, so far we've been bringing you some very exciting guests, and today is no different. I'm very excited to bring to the podcast Megan Dillon. Megan is out of Charlotte, North Carolina. She is in the L&D space. She's the manager of learning and development for GoHealth. I am so excited to have Megan Dillon with us, and I know you're going to gain a lot of valuable information from what she has to say. She's professional in what she does, and she is definitely somebody that we want to hear. So Megan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Reggie. And I have to say, I'm quite jealous of your location and your background. It just looks wonderful, but very happy to be here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, usually it's you wouldn't be jealous of me, although it's pretty hot and humid also up there in North Carolina, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, we are well into the 90s these days, so I'll be staying inside.
Yeah. Unless you're in the mountains. I was recording a podcast with somebody from North Carolina, and he was in the mountains, and he said it was like in the 70s.
Oh yeah, the mountains is definitely where it's at. It's beautiful up there, nice and cool. So
no humidity. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to having this discussion with you, Megan, for over a month now. We've been trying to get you. I know you're a busy person, and one of the reasons why I thought it would be very beneficial to our audience to have you is because you are actually a manager in a big corporation. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what you're currently working on? What do you do? How big is your team? What are some of the things that you're focusing on?
Sure. I'd love to, and thank you so much for the introduction. So I'm a manager of learning design and technology at an organization called GoHealth. Organization is based out of Chicago, but I'm very fortunate that we have a great work from home policy. As you stated earlier, I work out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And so our team is scattered throughout the country, actually. I work with a team of instructional designers, and we develop all of the onboarding curriculum for our new hires. Our audience are primarily sales consultants who are coming in to sell Medicare Advantage plans to, Medicare-aged consumers. So you can imagine, with people turning 65 every day, we're quite busy. And it's a really exciting time, I think, to be in the space. Outside of the onboarding curriculum, we also do a heavy amount of development in the continuous education space. So once we have all of our sales consultants trained and ready for workforce, it's also up to us to ensure that they're getting the professional development that they need, to keep up with the technology, to keep up with new endeavors, and to continue to refine their skills. So it is a busy job, and it's rewarding. We develop quite a bit of content, and we have a very strong team of instructional designers, ranging from junior instructional designers all the way up to senior instructional designers.
Excellent. How big is your team?
So I lead a team of 5 instructional designers, and then we also have 2 project managers on my team. And so that's really exciting because we are really able to provide kind of a full service to our clientele. Our clientele being the business mainly.
Yeah. Tell me, I've been asking the same question of all of my guests, especially people who are in the L&D space, as to how they how they came across this beautiful profession. Do you always dream to be an L&D professional?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and something that I'm also really interested in hearing from other, learning and development professionals, because I don't know many people who said, when I grow up, I
Yeah.
want to be in the L&D space.
Right.
So what I can tell you is that growing up, I knew I always wanted to be a teacher. And that's actually how I got my start in, I guess the K-12 side of things.
Yeah.
And so had a really successful career in my opinion as a teacher. And then I would say it's definitely my number one passion. However, knew that I wanted to do something different and wanted to kind of challenge myself and expand my skill set. And so going into instructional design just seemed like the most natural fit for someone who is passionate about education. When I was in K-12 education, I had the opportunity to work with teachers on the level of coaching. So I was able to coach teachers. I was able to do a lot of professional development and realized I really enjoy working with adult learners. They're motivated. They want to be there. And there's a lot of fun things you can do even with adult learners. And so found that kind of transitioning into instructional design was very, very natural for me.
Sure.
But I will say, Reggie, to your point, never did I think I was going to be an instructional designer or manager of L&D. I think the accidental instructional designer is very real for many people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's been the case for so many of us, right? That we came into the space, not really understanding what it was all about, and we sort of fumbled our way through it. Certainly, I did. I didn't know much about it when I first got started, but it's definitely a trend. And I'm so far I think I've had two. You're the third teacher, or a former teacher, who came into this space because they wanted to sort of expand their career opportunities. And there's so many teachers out there who are right now. For good or ill, right? They seem to be a little turned off with what's happening in education, and so a lot of people are considering, moving. I mean, I hear the comments all the time. Is that something that you still see from the people that you're in touch with?
Absolutely, yeah. I can tell you, at least on a weekly basis, I'll have educators reach out to me, just asking me to share my story as far as how I was able to kind of make that transition from education into instructional design.
Yeah.
I think teaching is one of the most important jobs in the world. And I am so, in awe of people who can do it and who do it daily and who are so, committed to it. But you're right. I do think that there is a transition happening right now between K-12 education and kind of, the corporate world. I think teachers are looking for different opportunities.
Sure.
And so, I think that instructional design is a great place for anyone trying to transition out of teaching to begin their L&D journey.
How did you start that journey yourself, right? When you decided, this is probably something I want to explore and consider, what were your first sort of steps into making that transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it started with research as far as looking at opportunities that were available, but also understanding where my skill set as an educator, could translate into more of a corporate skill set. And so started researching various roles. I think I looked at the role of project manager, right? As teachers, we're always managing someone or something. So I thought, maybe I could get into that. And then started seeing a lot of opportunities for instructional designers. And as I read through those job descriptions, I kind of found myself, a little bit more intrigued and curious, and thought this is probably an avenue that I can pursue and that I might do okay at. I think I've got some transferable skills here. I can tell you, in the beginning of my journey, I crafted what I thought was a really well written resume and started applying, and did not hear back from any organization or any company. Probably got close to anywhere from 20 to 50 rejections.
Sure.
Based on that resume, and it was a bit disheartening at first because you think you can do this, you've got what it takes. So for me, what really I think was the first step in solidifying the move was hiring a resume writer.
Mm.
I understand it's probably not something for everyone, but for me, it was eye-opening. She
Was
was really, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to ask. Was this a resume writer specifically in L&D space, in the L&D space, or um, you know?
Yeah, great question. So the resume writer that I used was a former recruiter. And
Okay,
she didn't necessarily recruit in the L&D space, but she just so happened to do a lot of resumes for teachers who were looking to transition into the IB work field. So
got it.
she was really knowledgeable on kind of what a resume needed to look like, in order to even just get through that first process of like, okay, your resume has the buzzwords or the keywords on it that can get through. If it's a large company, right, they're just kind of sifting through them, or a software even will sift through them.
Right,
So
right.
she really educated me around the need to ensure your resume kind of spoke to the job description.
Mm.
Um, and so what she and I did is she was really, really helpful in kind of taking my experience in not only teaching, but in, working with teachers, leading professional development, coaching teachers, and kind of turning it into what I call corporate speak.
Yes,
Um, and so
yes.
kind of turning those buzzwords that you see on the job applications, putting them on my resume. And the experience was all very valid. I just hadn't ever thought of it in the way that she kind of compelled me to think about it.
Yeah, it's a totally different lingo, right?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. But I can tell you now, as a hiring manager, it's absolutely one thing that I look for in a resume is do you have the ability to, or do you know what a needs analysis is? Have you done it? And so maybe we haven't done it in a super formal capacity as a teacher, but we're always assessing the needs of our learners and figuring
Right.
out, what we need to do to, get them to the next level. So
Did
at
did
any rate, that was definitely the first step in my journey.
did you have to go back to school and retool, reskill before you make the move, or have did you do it after, or you haven't done it at all? What was your experience there?
Yeah, no. So I did not go back to school. I finished my master's degree in education in 2015. And during that, part of my master's was looking at adult learners, understanding adult learning theory,
Yes.
understanding how adults are motivated by learning, andragogical practices. So I did have a little bit of background, but it was education and kind of a generalized education degree, so could have fit kind of any learner. I would say the one area that I did do some reskilling, and it was very informally, was teaching myself how to use e-learning software.
Yeah.
So took some, I want to say it was a LinkedIn learning class on Articulate, just a very beginner's class, downloaded the free trial
Yep.
and got to work.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, I guess I'm one of those kind of homegrown, designers when it comes to e-learning, really taught myself a lot. And then YouTube and Google kind of became my bestie.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I did the same thing. I had no idea. Now, my journey started a little bit, sooner than yours. It was back in 2007, 2008, and what I found that is that the tools have changed so much. They're so much better now. But it was one of those deals where I had to sign up for every single free account, sometimes using using multiple email addresses so I can
yeah,
give myself so I
I'm
can,
very familiar with that.
yeah, yeah. I don't think we're the only ones who've done that, but it helps, right? Because um, I've become a client to those companies, even though it took me
Yes,
probably a little longer to actually buy the software. But yeah, you make a very good point there, and that is that. And I tell people this all the time. You have the tools available. Everything is available on YouTube, right? Just Google it, or YouTube it, and you'll be able to learn, and grow in as an instructional designer without necessarily going back to school. Wouldn't you agree?
I completely agree. And it's why I think this role is great for anyone who is not even just teachers, but anyone who is kind of looking for a career change.
Yeah.
A lot of the training you can really do yourself as long as you're committed to it. Um, I think that the sky is the limit, to be quite honest. And I found that to be very true with my own journey.
Now you mentioned that um, one of the things that you pay attention to when hiring people as instructional designers is the fact that to have a solid resume.
Mhm.
Uh, what about a portfolio? I mean, are you specifically looking for a portfolio from these individuals? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So absolutely, portfolio for me as a hiring manager is something that I look for in every candidate. In fact, we used to have kind of a rule where our incoming candidates would need to do some sort of work sample for us, whether it was, a storyline or a RISE course, or if we were hiring for an instructor-led role, maybe they would need to put together some instructor-led training, and realize that anyone who is passionate about either becoming an instructional designer or who has instructional design experience, they're going to have a portfolio.
Yeah, yeah,
So we kind of did away with the assignment. People are working 40 hours a week, if not more. The last thing they want to do is sit down and do a very lengthy, articulate storyline assignment when they have their own work to do. So,
yeah, yeah.
but I say that because the portfolio became even more important to me at that point. So I always look for a portfolio. And then for those who are new to the field and who say, but I don't have one,
That's what I was going to ask next.
yeah. So I know because I did it myself. I highly recommend kind of what you and I talked about earlier. So downloading a free trial of
Yeah.
Articulate Rise, or the Articulate Storyline Suite rather. Get started, play around. You'd be surprised at what you can create in a small amount of time.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
go
Go ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the last thing that I look for. So I do get a lot of teachers who apply to become instructional designers on my team, and I always have a soft spot for them. I know what it takes. I know the journey. But one thing I think that's really important is when you're designing for your portfolio, that you do something. You select a topic that's fairly generic, but that's not necessarily related to, let's say, if you're a teacher teaching, which I do see a lot of, right? So some things that I always encourage people to design from are, topics around, uh, you know, cybersecurity, right? That's something that's easy to do. You can Google it online, figure out kind of the foundations of cybersecurity, and create something. Or workplace safety training, interviewing rapport, things that are easily, you can easily research, but that, show that you can create for a broad audience.
How detailed when you're looking at a portfolio, how detailed and how fancy
Right.
are these courses supposed to be, and that they would pique your interest as a manager?
Yeah, that's also a really great question. So in our organization, we have different levels of instructional designers. So if you're coming in as what I call an instructional designer level 1, that would be more of your junior novice instructional designer. I wouldn't expect all of the bells and whistles that I would expect out of a senior instructional designer. So I would be looking more so for like best practices. So do you understand how content should flow? Do you have objectives? Is your content tied to your objectives? Is your assessment tied to your objectives? Do you have the basics? Because I think that the bells and whistles, using the variables and storyline, making it super fancy can come, and that can be tough, right?
Sure.
But
And
I
it comes with
think
practice and time, and sure.
absolutely. I think what's more important is that the content is sound and it's developed with, adult learning theories in mind. So how are you motivating the learner? How are you engaging them right off the bat? Is it text heavy? For me, when I look at a portfolio and they have a sample, an e-learning sample, for example, that's really text heavy, I'm going to think twice because, we're adults, right? We can read, but also who wants to read, a 45-minute long course? Maybe I can look at it a different way, right? So maybe I'm looking at someone who can do different modalities. Can you create a video to go inside of your course? How can you capture me right off the bat? So to me, that's more important than a super snazzy, jazzy, beautiful course. Don't get me wrong, I do love them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a very good point. I think that sometimes, uh, well, it certainly was a bit for me, and I don't know if you find that it's the same in your experience in hiring, especially teachers. Um, is that the difference between teaching children and adults is vastly different, right? And
Mhm.
so I'm wondering if you're finding that the newer people who are joining, or at least you're considering to join your team, have made that transition
Right.
from pedagogy to andragogy. If we want to get really really into fancy terms.
Yeah.
What do you think there?
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point because I think for some teachers, and certainly myself, I thought, well, I know how to teach. Training can't be that much different. It is that because you're dealing with a different population. Um, you're also dealing with or training people who want to be there for the most part, who are motivated. Um, with kids, you kind of have to jump through some hoops sometimes just to get them to do what you need them to do. So it is very different. I will say though, good sound educational practices that exist in K-12 ed, in my opinion, still exist in adult ed. And so an example would be, having really well crafted objectives. That, in my opinion, I think that's still key, right? That's what your course or your learning would be based around. And that's the same thing in K-12 education. Making the objectives measurable. So how are you going to measure the success of the training? That's also something that I see a parallel to. And then, of course, assessment. So ensuring that your assessment is not just recall and knowledge based, ensuring that you're getting that application. I think one of the biggest differences in adult learners and when I'm developing training for adults is we want to ensure that we're training to the behaviors and the competencies that the learner is going to need to implement on the floor. And that's a little bit different, right? So when you think about adult learners and you think about, comparing it to the game of baseball, I'm going to sit you down as a kid. I might teach you about the history of baseball. I might show you different ways you can hit the ball. I might, teach you about some super famous players and have you emulate them. However, that's not necessarily going to help. As an adult, I'm going to get you out on the field playing baseball as early as possible with a lot of practice, showing you a lot of different techniques so that you can emulate those behaviors and competencies on the field when you get it.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely. I mean, you're on point there. And I tell when I come across people who are considering making the move. I mean, again, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is available for people. I mean, you don't have to spend any money to learn about the basics of this profession, but it is important to make sure that if your learning is being crafted to the audience at hand, and that is usually professionals who are very busy, who are either passionate about the work they do, or you want them to become more passionate about the work they're doing. And so the understanding of the techniques and the principles of adult learning are crucial I think in having a successful career. What are some advices that you give people who are maybe considering making the move and the transition? What would you recommend people do as they're
Yeah,
considering making this transition?
yeah. So, I think we touched on a couple earlier, but I can't recommend, if you can get a resume writer, I think that's number one. Especially like you kind of touched on earlier, someone who understands the L&D field. And if you don't have any of that formal corporate L&D experience, get someone who can write to that resume. I think that's number one. Number two, if you can't get a resume writer, then take a look at the job descriptions that you see posted for instructional design, learning and development consultant, whatever you're looking at. And then take a look at your experience and see how that job description, how you can incorporate some of those key phrases into your resume based on your own experience. So I think it all starts with the resume. Cover letter never hurts, but for me, it's the resume. And then number two, I think, getting that portfolio together is really important. So in my opinion, as a hiring manager, I look for, a strong articulate storyline sample, a strong articulate rise sample. If you have additional experience with video editing using Camtasia or beyond, that's always a plus. I know that some people are trained on Captivate or Captivate, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, Captivate.
You can tell I'm an articulate person.
Me too.
That's also fine. But have a portfolio with a couple of strong samples, and then instructor-led training still isn't. It's not gone, right? But it's more of a taking the place, in my opinion, of a virtual instructor-led training. So I think if you can put a work sample in that, some VILT that you've created, even better. So yeah, resume, portfolio. And then honestly, this is probably going to be the toughest thing to teach, but just grit and being okay with getting rejection after rejection after rejection. It's going to happen. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Are you seeing a greater influx of people? At least, are you getting more resumes nowadays? Is it because I feel that the at least our space is getting a little tighter and more competitive.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the second that we post a job for instructional designer or senior instructional designer, I would say within 1 to 3 business days there are hundreds and hundreds of we have a wonderful recruiting team, and so they do a wonderful job of sifting and then on candidates to us. But absolutely, it's a space that's getting tighter and tighter and more and more.
How do you stand out in a crowded space like that? I mean, what are some of the things that you would maybe advise people to do to maybe stand out a little bit more?
Yeah, great question. So outside of having a well-written resume, a cover letter also doesn't hurt. And then, your portfolio. But then I think that as a hiring manager, little things go a long way. So, reaching out on LinkedIn, I've never minded if a candidate has reached out to me and just said, hi, I'm so-and-so, really interested in this. Let me know if you have any additional questions. I think that's always really a really good way to go. Having your, the link to your portfolio on your resume is also really helpful. It's just kind of a one-stop shop. And then of course, just preparing for the interview. I really appreciate it when people take the time to get to know the company, get to know a little bit more about what we're about, ask really insightful questions as far as what we do in an L&D space. And then last but not least, as a hiring manager, and I think this is true for any role, if you can come in and you can kind of show someone how you can solve their problem, I mean, that's half the battle.
Yeah.
Right.
And for that, they need to understand your company and the people that you're trying to serve. Yeah.
Sure. And so it goes back to that research. But yeah, I think formalities go a long way, the introduction and all that good stuff. So, but you're right. It's a competitive space.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I'm seeing it just across the board, and so I think that my advice to people is the same. I mean, you got to keep knocking on doors, and don't be dissuaded by the rejections, right? Because it's just part of the game. Let me ask you this, because you were a teacher, you were in the classroom. Is most of your team right now remote? Are they working remotely?
100%, yes.
100%. So what would you, because that would be, I think, a very drastic transition for somebody who may be teaching in a classroom face-to-face with an audience, and now, they're in cyberspace, right? they're and so, number one, how do you help as a manager? How do you help your team stay engaged? And what can people do to get ready before making the move, and to stay motivated once they're in their new position?
So I do think that teachers probably had a little taste of the work from home life during COVID, and then they were put back into the classroom. And it's also something that I think about a lot as a former teacher, socializing, being in a brick and mortar space, being with people. If you're a people person and you need collaboration, face-to-face collaboration, then it could be that this space isn't for you, and that's 100% okay. There's also organizations who are back in the office full time, and maybe that would be a better fit for someone who really thrives off of that, face-to-face contact. That said, when I started at GoHealth, COVID was, it had just happened. And so we were looking for unique and creative ways to stay connected. I think most organizations leverage a messenger tool. We use Slack, but the expectation is that we are available on Slack, and we chat with each other throughout the day. I have a very open door policy as a manager, and so really encourage my team to come to me. Something else that we do is we have daily ID stand-ups. So we meet 4 times a week. On Fridays, we are off, just kind of to give everyone a little bit of a break. We don't meet, but they can of course come to me. And so two of those days we do our project status, project check-ins, where we look at where everyone is and what any needs are, next steps, etc. And then the other 2 days, this is the best part. So one day is what we call our culture build, and everyone from the team takes a week and we create some sort of team builder, whether it's a trivia game. Yeah, it's really fun, and it's been, honestly, in my opinion, one of the main things that's kind of held us together. So we do trivia, we'll do recipes. We did one really fun one recently where we all showed a baby picture and then we had to guess who it was. Yeah, so that was really cool. And then we have another day that we do kudos. So we'll give kudos to the team, people who have just gone above and beyond, or anyone who's just done something that you've noticed. And then we also do professional development on the kudos days, where we leave some time for, PD. If anyone is working on something really cool, they'll show. If someone wants to share an article and we discuss, we do that. It's a bit informal, but it's
great.
Also, it's been a really advantageous way for us to stay connected as a team.
How much turnover have you experienced personally in your team?
In my team, we've had very limited turnover, thankfully. Okay. And I will say, I think it's because we are such a close-knit team.
Yeah, that's the reason why I asked, because I think as I was listening to, it seems like you are very proactive in making sure that people are connected, right, on an ongoing basis, which brings me, and so that of course you're benefiting from the fact that because you have a tight-knit group, it's going to be more difficult for them to want to leave.
Right.
The other question I have that maybe you can touch on, is what other skill sets you think people? I mean, so we know that we've already mentioned, understand at least the basics of adult learning theory, instructional design. Make sure that you work on your resume, make sure that you have a portfolio. But what other skill set do you look for? Because I think that the reason why your team is so cohesive and working is because you when you hire people, you're also looking for other things, right? So what are some of those other things that people should be, maybe at least know, number one, and number two, it's like, work on those skills even more.
Yeah. So I think some of the skills are related to instructional design, but are also just across the board good soft skills to have as, a person, as a professional. Communication is going to be something that I look at when I'm interviewing someone. So, the way in which they're able to respond to questions, can they give full responses? Because I think that's going to translate into the work they're doing as an instructional designer. We have to write a lot of our own content. And so being a good communicator, being strategic and, cohesive with your thoughts is something that's really important. So solid communication is something that I definitely look for. This actually just came to mind and might be something good for the original question when we were talking about portfolios. So, most of the time instructional designers are writing their own content. And so having strong writing skills is something that I definitely look at. We kind of do have to be a jack of all trades in this field. And so having solid writing is something that I look at, whether it's technical writing skills, grammar, punctuation, mechanics, all that good stuff. And I don't expect perfection. We have we're fortunate that we have someone who can edit our work. We have Grammarly. But that said, I still expect the writing to be, we're writing for adults, right? So let's write like we are writing for adults. So that's really important. Go ahead.
Any other and by the way, there are so many tools out there now that can help people become better communicators, especially in written format. So definitely out there. Well, anything else? Because I'm thinking that a lot of things that I look for is attention to detail, how much of a team player this person's going to be, right? How collaborative is this a person that is going to want to mix with us? Is this a person that is going to want to stay sort of by themselves? I mean, do you look for specific framework from an individual before you say, this person is going to fit my team and bring and contribute to the team and the work that we're doing?
I think everything you just said is definitely at the forefront. So, are you collaborative? How do you handle working on one project with someone else, right? That can be a little tricky, because oftentimes when we get projects as instructional designers, we think of it as my project, my baby, right? So how are you at collaborating and delegating work, or at taking delegation? Another thing that comes to mind is feedback. So how well do you respond to feedback? And are you someone who personalizes that and who has a hard time kind of taking the feedback and making changes? Or are you someone who can say, absolutely, I get it, let's work together to make this great as it can be? So that's another thing that I look at. And then for more of a senior ID role, I'm going to look at, your stakeholder management skills. So, how do you work cross-functionally with different areas of the business, and kind of impart your L&D expertise to them? How do you communicate that to them in a way that is respectful, to their wants and what they want, but that also shows them that, we are the L&D experts, and we can definitely help and get the message across in a way that's, supported by best practices, by best adult learning theory, all of that good stuff. But we're a close team, so being able to be responsive, collaborative, all of that is really important, especially like you mentioned earlier, in the virtual world that we're in. It's even more important now.
I also, I like to always ask myself, how inquisitive is this person? Do they enjoy learning? Right? Because this is a field that if you stop learning, you die, right? You'll be obsolete in no time. And so I'm always looking for an individual who, do you like to learn? Do you like to play with things, right? Do you like to break things apart and put them back together, right? How inquisitive are you? Because I think that also brings, a sense of creativity to the mix. So what do you think about that? I mean, do you look for that? Or do you look for the, have they done it in the past? So that means they have the educations, they have certificates, they have courses they've taken. Or do you say, okay, I'm gonna look for this, but then I'm gonna guide them in a direction, and I'm gonna sign them up for courses, and I'm gonna, ask them to read this. I mean, what's your philosophy there?
So something that I think I look for more when I'm thinking about promotions within the team. So, when you start out as maybe a junior instructional designer, those who are going out on a limb to learn something new, whether it's teaching themselves, a complicated variable in storyline, or, researching, adult learning practices and then putting them into play with their own work and then advocating for it themselves. I definitely really appreciate someone who's curious, takes risks, and, kind of goes out on a limb to try new things. And I think that's really how, people can get to the next level. I also think it's probably how I've gotten, to where I am, because I've never been scared to take a risk, and I've never been scared to kind of get gritty with it and learn and break it and then fix it and then try again. And, again, back to the risk taking, but it's where you will find the most creativity. And I think that getting back to kind of teachers and transitioning teachers, these are people who are used to doing work like this.
Sure.
They're used to having to find 10 ways to do one thing. And so I find that's an invaluable skill set for an instructional designer to have.
Yeah, that's a great point. What do you see happening? I mean, now that you've been sort of, I mean, we all experienced, COVID-19, and we saw what it did to corporations, right? A lot of companies had to move their training and learning and development online or virtually. I think that I think this is sort of the new normal. I think that there's no turning back. What do you see happening in the next couple of years, and at least in corporate training?
Yeah.
And how can learning and development professionals help the rest of the organization?
Yeah. Great question. Something I think about a lot as an L&D leader, as far as, when we're developing our training, how can we develop it to really, have that stick-to-itiveness and meet the needs of the virtual learner, because that's what we all are now. I can't tell you the last time I saw a training classroom and learners in it, right, in a formal setting. So I think that, to answer your question, I think we're going to continue to see digital training, whether that is formal e-learnings or, the virtual instructor-led training. I think facilitation and virtual facilitation is going to be a skill that you're going to see a need for. So people who are able to command a virtual room and, still convey, points and command of the room in the space, and, still give learners what they need to feel supported. More and more, though, what I do hear from companies, and one of the things I know we're up against, is L&D is not a moneymaker. And so how can we, still do our job and develop training while allowing the floor to be profitable? Yeah. And that's where our job gets challenging. And so I see that need for, the just-in-time or the on-demand training as being something that is, I see kind of creeping into a lot of different organizations and probably sticking. So whether that, a company YouTube channel, where you can get a quick training on demand in the form of a video, whether it's a knowledge center where you can get any and all questions answered as soon as you need it. I heard something recently from someone in my former organization. He works in more of a call center environment, and so when a agent gets off the phone, if they have about 2 to 3 minutes of downtime, they're assigned to micro learning immediately.
Yes. Yeah.
And it comes right to them. And I thought,
oh wow.
Yeah. So I thought that is brilliant. You get off the phone, you start your micro learn in between calls, you pick up a call, and then you finish it in the next, 3 minutes after that call. And the really cool thing about this is apparently the software was intuitive enough that it could listen to, pick up what the agent was saying and even identify areas of need that the agent, had from a learning perspective.
Wow.
And the software could assign the training to them, based on, maybe they need some soft skills work on their opening or their introduction. And so they're going to assign them a training for that. It was really cool.
Oh, wow.
But I say that because I think that, we hear a lot of different things. We hear we need a YouTube, we need a TikTok for learning, we need all of this. But I think really what the need is we need something quick, on demand, and for the moment of need, whatever the platform looks like. And so I think we're going to see that a lot, in this new virtual world.
I think we don't have to complicate things, right? There are great tools out there, but doesn't mean that we have to use every single tool.
Right.
I'm a big proponent of, hey, what's the culture like, and what do you think is going to be more effective for our tool, for our culture and our people, and how they're going to consume the content, right? And so you don't have to use every tool out there, but certainly we do have a lot more today. That's why I started this podcast. I started this podcast because I think that people who are on the go, they can listen to it. They can. So hopefully it's entertaining. They can get some nuggets out of it, and so YouTube channels, podcasting. my first guest in the podcast, she's very big into TikTok, and so I guess it really depends on your audience, right, and how they're gonna respond to what you're trying to deliver. But those are very good points. And you made a very good point about the L&D usually being a not being, it's actually it's a cost center, not a profit center. And what I tell people is, especially now that there's some hints of maybe a recession. Historically, during bad recessions, L&D is the first. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I don't agree with it. I think that this is where people, companies need to invest the most. I don't. It'll be interesting to see if we go, if corporate America goes there, if we have a long recession and if corporate America goes there. But this is where making sure that you're valuable to the corporation, to the company, to the organization is key, right? And the other thing I tell people that I've led and people who are thinking about it is think like an owner, right? Think like a business owner. So I think that every L&D professional should be almost like an entrepreneur, right? So if you're thinking like an owner, you're looking for ways to save the company money, right? And do things in an efficient and effective way, faster, better, right? Not just on time, but ahead of schedule if possible. And thinking, having that mindset of thinking like an owner, because that really, that's something I had to learn, by the way. It didn't come natural to me. And I had some very good bosses who, and managers who told me, look, they sort of brought me to understand the business. But that taught me the value of, hey, if I start thinking like an owner, and by the way, you get more creative in the way you deliver things. You get, you get very, very creative. Sometimes you don't have all the tools, right? The business may say, no, you can't have this. And so that's where you have to be very resilient and resourceful. But I think that to me, that's something that I look for and that I really, really, preach, right? That people in this space, professionals in this space, need to think like a business owner, right? If they're going to be successful. But what do you say to that? And because I sense that you are, you're also of the same mindset.
Yes. Yeah. Everything that you just said really resonated with me. And it's a very similar experience I had too. I didn't start out understanding that as an L&D professional, right? Like understanding, I just kind of assumed going into this industry, like, people want learning. I can develop it. We're all going to be happy. But you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, L&D is one of the first things to go when you think about, a corporate downsize, recession, all of that stuff. And so really having a seat at the table and understanding the business are two things I think that any L&D leader, needs to shore up on or needs to do. And then I think being able to, it goes back to solving people's problems. How can L&D solve the organization's problem? And then how can you prove ROI, return of impact on that? Or I'm sorry, return of investment on that? How can you prove that? And then I think, you've kind of shown or proved, what L&D can do for the organization. And it did take me a really long time to understand that and to learn that, you got to take initiative as an L&D leader, and you really need to go in and kind of prove to the company what L&D can do. And then make sure you're measuring it and showing everyone, the value that learning has on the organization. And unfortunately, I work for an organization that really does value L&D, values professional development. And so I'm very fortunate. For leaders who are working at those corporations, definitely getting that seat at the table, solving problems through L&D is huge.
Yeah, certainly for those of us in leadership, and I guess the people that we're leading, who make are part of our teams, is I'm the type of manager or leader that has always taught. I've always taught my team, look, don't bring me problems unless you're willing to bring me 1 to 3 solutions to solve that problem, right? Because it's so much easier to, well, I'm having issues with this, right? And so you're the person who gets paid the big bucks, right? So here it is. I think that if somebody's going to grow in this space, you need to show that you're a leader and a manager even before you get the title, right? And so I always taught my team, look, when you have a very open door policy as well, and this is of course before COVID when people can actually come into my office.
Sure, you literally had an open door.
Yeah. And so, but I always taught them, or not taught them, but maybe instructed them to, hey, you can always come to me with issues. I want to hear about them, but I want you to think, okay, what are some solutions that I suggest for? And by the way, a lot of the times when they would bring me the issue that they were facing, with the solution, I would say, yeah, that sounds great. Go ahead and do it.
Yes.
I mean, that makes absolute sense to me. Do you agree with that?
I do. And I also think, going back to, we were talking earlier about interviews and what I look for as a hiring manager, right? So being solution oriented is huge for me. So approaching me with the solution even before you give me the problem is something that I'm going to really admire and encourage all of my people to do. Because you're right, like as managers, people think, oh, you can solve the problem, this is what you do. But I really want to incentivize my people, right, to solve those problems. That's going to help them grow professionally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so being solution oriented, I think, is huge. In fact, it's definitely something that I would look for even in initial interviews with someone who doesn't have any ID experience, right? If you can show me that you know how to solve a problem, that's also a huge lift.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you, and I think that it makes the team stronger, right? When you have multiple people looking at issues and solving potential problems, it's better than just you as the leader having to make all those calls. And sometimes I would tell them, look, sometimes you're gonna make a suggestion and I'm not gonna agree with it, but that don't take it personally, which brings me back to the point you mentioned earlier about feedback and coaching. I think that people need to understand that even the greatest professionals out there, and I think like professional athletes, super gifted. I mean, getting paid gajillions of dollars, right? Because they're so good at what they do, yet they still have coaches,
right?
who work them out like if they were just rookies, right? And so, I think that the people who are going to be successful in growing as a professional are the people who actually are coachable, right?
Yes.
And who listen, because I tell my teams, this is not, I want you to be better, right? If you're better, we're better as a team. And so I think some people find it very difficult at times to get that candid advice or feedback from their managers, but it's so crucial for our professional and personal growth. What has been your experience? I mean, do you agree, disagree? Would you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And one thing that I like to think about with coaches, especially people who might be a little bit, resistant to feedback, is so think about the coach. I don't know who your football team is. Mine is the Carolina Panthers. I'm assuming, are you a Dolphins fan?
No. I'm in Miami, but I'm a Buffalo Bills fan.
Okay. Well, you're in good company. So my family is a huge Bills fan.
Oh
yeah, huge.
I like them already.
Yes. My husband's family is all from upstate New York, so huge Bills.
Right?
But anyways, when you think about the coach of a team, right? Coach of the Panthers, they want their players to win. And so if I'm the coach, I want my team to win. I'm not giving you this feedback because I want to, crush you. I'm giving you this feedback so that we can win together.
Yes.
I'm fortunate that my team is wonderful and has always been very, very receptive to feedback and they want to work to improve because they know, it's improving themselves professionally.
Correct.
And ultimately, that's going to get them somewhere. But coaching is something that I think as a manager, it's vital. And I think that now that we're virtual, you've got to find a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, again, I don't think we're going back to the way things were. And so if by the way, I mean, what I'm seeing more and more in job posts for instructional designers is, you can work remote. I mean, a lot
Yeah.
more of these, right? So definitely being able to be open to feedback, being accountable, it's a big one too, right? That you hold yourself accountable first, and I think that staying connected. I think you mentioned that earlier, and it's so crucial, right? To stay connected, connect with each other on an ongoing basis, right?
Yes.
Have each other's backs, help each other out, um, and so because I think that creates a greater bond amongst the teammates.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important. Listen, we could go on for forever. This has been great, and I think that what you've brought today is it's like real life application as to people who are considering switching careers as to what they need to do. So I really appreciate you giving us the inside scoop as to what a manager it looks for
Yes.
when they're hiring. Any last words of wisdom that you like to leave the audience?
Yeah, I think one thing I alluded to earlier, but anyone looking to transition, I think, having the best resume, having a great cover letter, having a solid portfolio, all those things are important. But like I said earlier, it's really going to come down to, your stick-to-itiveness, your perseverance, and then your resilience. Keep at it, keep going, because you will eventually get there. It's going to feel a little hopeless at times, but I promise you, you will get there.
Yeah.
You just got to keep going.
Yeah, there is a need for instructional designers and people in the L&D space. So absolutely, I
Absolutely.
totally agree with you. Megan, thank you so much. This was great. Let's stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Let's connect back. And by the way, we're gonna put your link somewhere, in your bio here in the description of the course. So if you wanna, I don't know, if people wanna pick your brain, I know that you're busy, but maybe they can shoot you a direct message and
Absolutely. I would
create
love
that
that.
connection for you. Thank you so much. And for the
Yeah.
rest of you, I hope you really enjoyed it. I thought that Megan was going to be a very important guest to have because of what she brings to the table as a hiring manager and somebody who's leading the team. And I think she's given us some things to really think about as to some tactical and practical things that we can do in order to get in this space and be able to succeed. So hopefully you gained a lot. If you like what you heard today, please like, share, subscribe, comment. I want to hear from you, and I'll I think that as we continue to grow our community, we're going to be listening to a lot more voices. Hopefully as good as Megan. So thank you for joining us. Until next time, have a good day.